On the humid morning of September 8, 1971, the sun rose over Lagos not to bring light, but to witness a spectacle of death that would haunt the Nigerian consciousness for generations to come. 30,000 people had gathered at the famous Bar Beach, a crushing sea of humanity that spilled over sand dunes, climbed atop swaying palm trees, and pressed dangerously against the fragile wooden barricades erected by the military police, all desperate to catch a glimpse of the final moments of one man. They had not come to mourn a hero or to celebrate a festival. They had come to verify with their own eyes that the monster who had turned their city into a slaughterhouse was truly mortal. The air was thick with a mixture of salt spray, sweat, and palpable fear, a tension so heavy it felt as if the sky itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable climax of a story written in blood. When the prison truck finally groaned to a halt and the dust settled, the doors swung open to reveal him, Dr. Ishola Oyenusi, the man who had terrorized the nation with a ruthlessness that defied comprehension. But as he stepped out into the blinding glare of the execution ground, facing the row of soldiers who were already checking the actions of their automatic rifles, he did not weep, he did not tremble, and he did not beg for the mercy of God or man. Instead, Ishola Oyenusi looked directly at the cameras, locked eyes with death itself, and did the unthinkable. He smiled. To understand the monster, one must first understand the man, and to understand the man, one must understand the fractured world that created him. Ishola Oyenusi was not born with a gun in his hand, nor did he emerge from the womb with the title of doctor. Yet the seeds of his eventual destruction were sown in the fertile soil of post-Civil War Nigeria, a time when the country was trying to heal but was simultaneously drowning in a chaotic flood of loose weapons and desperate ambition. Born in the western region, Oyenusi was, by all accounts, a man of sharp intellect and considerable charm, possessing a magnetic personality that could have propelled him to success in politics or business had his moral compass not been so irreparably broken. He arrived in Lagos not as a conqueror, but as an ordinary seeker of fortune, caught in the mesmerizing glare of the city that promised everything to everyone, but delivered luxury only to a select few. The psychological transformation from Ishola, the man, to Oyenusi, the monster, was not immediate, but rather a slow, corrosive burn fueled by a dangerous cocktail of envy, entitlement, and a refusal to accept the humble station that life had assigned him. He looked at the gleaming cars of the Lagos elite, the expansive mansions of the industrialists, and the effortless power of the political class, and he decided that the slow grind of honest labor was a game for fools, a rigged system he had no intention of playing. The catalyst for his descent into the underworld was as old as time itself, a desperate need to impress a woman, a romantic obsession that would serve as the ignition switch for a career of unparalleled violence. Legend tells us that Oyenusi was deeply in love, a consuming passion that blinded him to reason, and when his lover found herself in financial distress, unable to maintain the lifestyle she desired, or perhaps simply struggling to pay her rent, Oyenusi saw an opportunity to prove his worth not as a provider, but as a savior. He did not seek a loan from a bank, nor did he take on extra shifts at a workplace. Instead, he crossed the Rubicon of morality with terrifying ease, stealing a car in a brazen act that was less about the money and more about the thrill of taking what was not his. He sold the vehicle for 400 naira, a princely sum in those days, and handed the proceeds to his beloved. But in that transaction, he gained something far more dangerous than cash. He discovered the intoxicating power of crime, the rush of adrenaline that comes from imposing one's will upon the world, and the realization that with enough audacity, the rules of society could be rewritten. That first theft was the death of his conscience. He realized he didn't need to be a doctor of medicine to operate on the city of Lagos. He only needed to be a doctor of fear, surgically removing wealth from its owners with the precision of a predator.
By the dawn of the 1970s, the name Dr. Oyenusi had become a whisper that froze the blood of every Lagosian, a synonym for a sudden, violent death that could strike anyone, anywhere, at any time. He did not work alone. He assembled a gang of hardened criminals who viewed him not just as a leader, but as a semi-divine figure, a man touched by the gods of war and fortune who could lead them to riches beyond their wildest dreams. They struck with military precision, targeting banks, factories, and payroll convoys with a level of coordination that left the Nigerian police force chasing ghosts, always arriving minutes too late to find anything but tire tracks, shattered glass, and the cooling bodies of those who had dared to resist. Oyenusi was not a thug who bludgeoned his way through life. He was arrogant, theatrical, and deeply psychological in his methods, often arriving at the scene of a crime dressed in immaculate suits, playing the role of a gentleman bandit who would politely ask you to lie on the floor before shooting you for moving too slowly. This strange juxtaposition of civility and brutality created a mythos around him, a larger-than-life persona that the newspapers devoured, turning him into a celebrity villain whose exploits were discussed in every beer parlor and market stall from Ikeja to Lagos Island. The terror Oyenusi inflicted was compounded by the widespread belief in the supernatural, a belief he cultivated and exploited with the skill of a master propagandist to ensure his absolute dominance over the criminal underworld. It was whispered in hushed tones that the doctor possessed powerful juju, spiritual charms and amulets prepared by powerful herbalists that made him invisible to the police and impervious to their bullets. Stories circulated that he could vanish into thin air when cornered, that gunshots fired at him would simply turn into water, and that he could sense danger before it arrived, a supernatural radar that kept him one step ahead of the law. This belief in his invincibility was so potent that even some police officers were terrified to engage him, fearing that they were fighting a spirit rather than a man, a demon who could not be killed by mortal weapons. Oyenusi basked in this fear, feeding the rumors, smiling that enigmatic smile that suggested he knew secrets about life and death that ordinary men could not comprehend. But as his ego swelled to the size of the city he terrorized, he forgot the fundamental law of nature, that even the most powerful gods can bleed, and that pride is merely the prelude to a devastating fall. The turning point in the dark saga of Dr. Oyenusi came in March 1971 at the Wahum factory in the industrial heart of Ikeja, a robbery that would ultimately seal his fate and galvanize the entire nation against him. It was meant to be another masterpiece of criminal engineering, a quick strike to snatch the £28,000 payroll that was destined for the factory workers, but the operation descended into a chaotic bloodbath that stripped away any lingering romanticism about the gentleman thief. In the heat of the robbery, as panic spread and the air filled with the acrid smoke of gunfire, a brave police constable named Nweke attempted to intervene, doing his duty to protect the innocent lives and property under his watch. Oyenusi and his gang did not hesitate. They cut him down with a brutality that shocked the conscience of the public, leaving the officer dead in the dust and fleeing with the blood-stained money. This was not just a robbery, it was a direct declaration of war against the Nigerian state, an act of defiance that said the doctor was more powerful than the law, more powerful than the government, and more powerful than the sanctity of human life. I want you to pause and think about the atmosphere in Lagos at this time. The city was paralyzed by the idea that one man could be so powerful that bullets couldn't touch him. It's easy for us to look back now and see the superstition, but in 1971, the fear was real and tangible. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you think the legend of Oyenusi's invincibility was purely a result of superstition and fear, or was it a sign of the ineffectiveness of the police force at the time? Was he a product of a broken system, or simply a broken man? Go down to the comments right now and type system or superstition and let me know what you think. The murder of Constable Nweke changed the equation entirely. Oyenusi was no longer just a criminal to be caught. He was a rabid animal that had to be put down for the safety of the herd. The government, embarrassed and enraged by the audacity of the crime, unleashed the full weight of its resources, launching a manhunt of unprecedented scale that turned every street corner in Lagos into a potential trap. The newspapers, which had once treated his exploits with a mix of horror and fascination, now demanded justice, screaming for the head of the man who had killed a defender of the peace. The Robin Hood narrative, however flimsy it had been, evaporated instantly, replaced by the stark reality of a cold-blooded cop killer who cared nothing but his own greed. The pressure on the police was immense, a crushing weight to restore order and prove that the Nigerian state was still in control of its own capital. Unbeknownst to Oyenusi, who was likely celebrating his haul and basking in his own perceived immortality, the clock had started ticking, and the sands of his time were running out faster than he could ever imagine.
The downfall of empires rarely comes from the outside. It almost always begins with a crack from within, a betrayal by those closest to the throne. For Ishola Oyenusi, the end did not come in a glorious shootout or a blaze of Hollywood-style gunfire. It came through the whisper of a terrified accomplice who realized that loyalty to the doctor was a one-way ticket to the grave. The police, under immense pressure to deliver results, managed to apprehend one of Oyenusi's key lieutenants, a man who knew the secrets, the hideouts, and the habits of the gang. Under the intense heat of interrogation, likely a brutal affair given the policing standards of the era, the loyalty of the gang member crumbled, and the invincible aura of the doctor was stripped away to reveal his location. The information provided was precise, a roadmap to the heart of darkness, leading the authorities directly to the sanctuary where Oyenusi believed he was safe from the eyes of the law. When the police finally closed the net around him, the confrontation was shockingly anticlimactic, a testament to the fact that stripped of his element of surprise and his gang, Oyenusi was just a man. The details of the arrest vary in the retelling, but the core truth remains that he was captured not by magic, but by good old-fashioned police work and the frailty of human trust. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, the reality of his situation must have crashed down upon him with the weight of a collapsing building. The charms, the amulets, and the whispered prayers of protection had all failed him in his hour of greatest need. He was paraded before the press, stripped of his fine suits and his arrogance, yet even in captivity, flashes of his defiance remained. He confessed to his crimes with a chilling nonchalance, admitting to the robberies and the killings as if he were reciting a grocery list, unburdened by guilt or remorse. The doctor was now a patient of the state, and the prescription for his malady was written in the harsh laws of the robbery and firearms decree: death by firing squad. And so we return to where we began, to the sandy shores of Bar Beach on that fateful September morning, where the final act of this tragedy was set to play out before a captivated nation. The trial had been swift, the verdict inevitable, and the sentence absolute. There would be no appeals, no prison breaks, and no escape for the man who had made Lagos bleed. As Oyenusi stood tied to the stake, flanked by 6 of his accomplices who looked far more terrified than their leader, the atmosphere was electric with a mix of vengeance and tragedy. Witnesses reported that Oyenusi kept his composure until the very end, scanning the crowd with eyes that seemed to mock the very spectacle of his death, perhaps believing that his legend would outlive his body. He famously told journalists in the days leading up to his death, "I am dying for the crime I committed," a statement of fact that lacked any trace of repentance, a final act of ego from a man who refused to bow. The order was given: ready, aim, fire, and the roar of the rifles shattered the morning air, a thunderous volley that echoed across the Atlantic Ocean and signaled the end of an era. The bullets tore through the myths, through the rumors of invincibility, and through the flesh of Ishola Oyenusi, slumping his body against the ropes that bound him to the stake. The crowd erupted, a release of tension that had been building for years. But as the smoke drifted away in the sea breeze, a heavy silence lingered underneath the noise. The doctor was dead, his reign of terror ended by the cold physics of lead and velocity. But the scar he left on the psyche of Nigeria would never fully heal.
He was the first of the super criminals, the prototype for the violent armed robbers that would plague the nation in the decades to follow, a grim reminder that when ambition is divorced from morality, the result is always catastrophe. The story of Ishola Oyenusi is more than just a crime thriller. It is a cautionary tale written in the history of a nation finding its way through the darkness. He was a man who wanted too much, too fast, and was willing to pay for it with the lives of others, only to find that the ultimate price was his own soul. His life serves as a brutal reminder that while crime may offer a shortcut to fame and fortune, the destination is always the same, a violent end and a legacy of shame. There is no charm, no juju, and no intelligence that can outrun the consequences of evil. If you found this deep dive into Nigerian history captivating, please do us a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. We are dedicated to bringing you the most gripping real-life stories from history, retold with the respect and detail they deserve. From the shores of Bar Beach to the streets of your city, stay vigilant, stay safe, and remember, history is always watching. See you in the next video.